Welcome to Act 6 on the art of storytelling. But that's not all we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Seema Anand's story herself. So, as Kiara just mentioned, Seema, for those of you who don't know, she is a mythologist, an author, a Kama Sutra expert, and a storyteller. Thank you so much, Seema, for taking the time. I know this is a very busy week for you with birthdays all through. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me. Yes, you're right. All my three children have their birthdays this week, and we have a standing joke that maybe I had a mating season. Therefore they're all born at the same time.
Lovely,
So yeah,
lovely.
not to worry. Here we are. Even the sun has come out a little bit for you today, briefly. So it promises to be a good chat.
Absolutely. Seema, with you there, how can it not be a good chat? Come on, seriously.
That's so sweet. Okay, let's roll right into it.
All right. So Seema, what's your story, right? I mean, how did you arrive at this? Dilli di kudi, sitting in Horan talking about sex.
Okay, so it actually is it's quite a sort of circuitous route. I started off always have been very interested in the idea of stories because I believe, Nina, that the stories that we tell, they define us. You know, when you tell stories of what you expect a good woman to be like, then you set the standard for what everybody should conform to. We were just listening to the end of that conversation about conforming and being part of how people think you should behave and so on. So we actually do that through the stories that we tell. You know, when you tell stories of how a man comes home drunk and he beats up his wife, but she's so good, she never says anything, she's never let it out into the world, she's maintained the izzat of the family. That's what you expect a good woman to be. The moment you say, "Muh khol ke sare nu keh dendi hai," you know, she's out there talking about it, da, 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 she becomes the bad woman. So the stories that we tell are the ultimate power. They define our identity. I've always been interested, particularly in how we define women's identities through the stories that we tell. And as I worked on this, you know, I grew up in India, much like a lot of other people over here. And I found that through school, through college, we were never taught any of the Indian texts. We only ever studied European literature. And so I was working with mythologies, but European mythologies at that point. And it was as I got older and I realized that the more I studied about women's stories, the less you ever saw a story which talks about a woman's right to her own body. That was always property. It's always somebody else's property. And so I decided to see what are the stories that we had silenced, because our identities depend not only on the stories that we tell, but equally on the stories that we silence. So I thought, let's go and find out what are the stories that we've silenced. And I came upon the stories of the Kam Shastras. And then I decided that it was going to be a short sort of foray into this, 15,000 words, one paper, move on.
Once I got to ask you, when was this, Seema? When was this? How many
about
years
19,
ago?
About 19 years ago. 19 years ago. I'm still studying it, and I still feel like I just don't know enough, because the more I study, the less I know. And, we are very fortunate. Like I said, we never studied anything to do with Indian literature. I have started studying it in more recent years. 25 years ago, I started. The Kama Sutra work I started about 19 years ago. And I'll tell you something, this is the country that developed the most exquisite idea of sensuality, of sexuality, of desire. We are, I mean, since we're talking about stories, I just want to mention this. You know, if you look at any other culture, the Judaic Christian cultures, they begin the origin myth is all about sin. You know, Adam and Eve commit a sin. They do something wrong. And from there, we are born and the body is sinful. Our in ancient Hindu belief, it is about ananda. It is about bhogam. It is about desire and love and pleasure. We say that, you know, when Lord Shiva he feels a little bit of ichha, he feels desire. And he decides he's coming down. He's coming down from that primordial place in eternal space where he lives. And he decides to come to this earth at the same time that he feels this ichha. That's the same time, a little flower that is known in our literature as the Bhoga Lolika. The Bhoga Lolika flowers, it blossoms on earth. That is his Bhog Shakti, because if he's to come down, the gods all live in Ananda, they live in eternal bliss. He needs that eternal bliss when he comes down. So we believe that the world is created from ichha, from desire, and bhogam or pleasure is a very large part of that. So yeah, we actually have a lot of stories to deal with the beauty of sexuality and sensuality. And so, yeah, that's what I went off to look for them.
You know, Seema, I mean, one is so grateful that you exist. It's so sad there aren't enough people who are doing this. I mean, you are one of a kind, and that's why, I mean, I really appreciate your taking the time and always supporting me and putting yourself out there, and the amount of content that you churn out. I think it's wonderful. But I think I have to come to this question that, you know, you're 60, right? You're 59, 60, or somewhere around there.
60.
One would, yes. So bingo. So one would expect that at 60 you'd be staid. I mean, look at, you know, a regular 60-year-old. I mean, and here you are, such a seductress. I mean, Seema, I'm not bullshitting you. The fact of the matter is, you are a seductress. You're like sex. You're like, oh my God. Like, you're like, you know, I've told you I can't take my eyes off you, right? So how does that make you feel? No, but Seema, the reality is, I'm sure I'm not the only person who tells you stuff like this. That, oh my God, like, one is just completely in your rapture. How does that make you feel? The fact that at 60 people would be talking about, oh, menopause, woman knows sex. But the fact, how does that make you feel that you have this power? You know you have this power, right? Be honest, Seema.
Well, I tell you,
Honest.
no, all I see is my gray hair and my wrinkles. But I tell you what, Nina, it was a learning moment. I've always said this, that, you know, so society has created a sort of narrative for us. So we live within this narrative. And that narrative says that, okay, when you get married, that's the first time that you should ever think about sex and desire. You need to have a lot of wonderful sex with your husband. The moment you have children, you have to stop thinking about it, because now you're a mother, you can't think about it. You get a little bit older, you can't think about it at all. And your body belongs to somebody else. Your pleasure is somebody else's property. Everything comes to you from somewhere else. And I find that because we've lived in this narrative, you learn to shut that side of your brain off, you know, and everything else you can be really good at. Like, I could go out and do an amazing degree and I'd be great at that, and I'm allowed to be. I could do a job and I could be great at that, and I'm allowed to be great at that. I could be a wonderful cook at home. I could be an amazing mother. I'm allowed to be. This is the one thing we're not permitted. And so we're taught it's a bad thing. We shut off that side of our brain, and we live with half our brain, because you can't divide up your Shakti, right? You can't divide up your energy. So you live with half your brain. And I find that as a woman, because we all grow up with the same society, we grow up with the same narrative. I find that as a woman, I would take on so much onto myself. Like, I would hold myself to blame for a lot of stuff. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you know, if somebody said, oh, you know, you're like this, you kind of accept it, because you have that little demon inside your head that is telling you that this side of your, you know, your desires, your wants, your pleasures, they're all made to make you feel guilty. If I want to go out and have a massage when one of the kids needs to go for a swimming lesson, or a swimming date, you know, I really feel like going swimming today, Mom. I'm sorry, but I booked a massage. how guilty you feel. Like, no, okay, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to take you swimming instead. You're made to believe that there's something not okay if you think like that. And then it was literally from my studies, one day the penny dropped that I'm okay. It's okay. And the empowerment that came with it. I'm not saying that it tells you that you have to go out and have sex every day. It's got nothing to do with having sex. It's about suddenly coming to this idea that you're a human being with desires and you're permitted to have desires. That desire can be for me to make kale chane today, or it can be for me to spend 3 hours getting a facial done or doing my shringar, whatever. But just giving yourself that permission, it suddenly makes you whole. And you know what? This idea of sensuality, I have to say this, sorry, but it is part of us. It's part of our being. We're the only species that are born with an organ that is only made for pleasure. You have a clitoris. It has no other function. It hasn't got a urethra. It's like the penis. You can't pee through it. You can't have babies through it. You can't do anything. There is only one function to it. It's for pleasure. We're not even told that it exists. When was the first time you discovered that a clitoris even exists? And just to let you know how much we've been pushed down on this point, in the year that Viagra was brought out, and I'm trying to remember what it was, the year that the Viagra was brought out, that's the year that the paper on the clitoris was published. So we have studied the male organ to the point where we've understood how you can enhance its function from the inside,
Really?
not
Wow.
by outer stuff, but from the inside. We didn't even know anything about the clitoris. Come on, man. This is like, it is
Seriously.
all about suppression.
Oh my God, you really hit a nerve. I mean, seriously. I mean, when you say it like that, my God, the scripts need to change, right? And that's the power of storytelling. But before we come to, storytelling, I want to ask you, what would your message be? Because what I'm hearing you say is also like what Neha Bhatt, the Indian sex therapist, was talking about. It's so much about allowing yourself, right? And whether it's to make your desire is to make kale chane, or whether it's to have sex with 5 men or women or whatever you're into, right? So, what would your message be to women of all ages when it comes to owning your sexuality? What would your message be?
Literally just this, that we've been taught to be afraid of it. We've been taught it's a bad thing, that it's a dirty thing. To say to yourself that this is your innermost Shakti. We're born with three Shaktis. When Lord Shiva, as Tyagaraja, comes down to earth, he's always depicted with three Shaktis. There's the Yoga Shakti, that's
Mhm.
the one that's birthed him more or less, or births the earth. So that's Mother Earth. There's the Bhoga Shakti, your desires, and there's the Veera Shakti, which is the outside Shakti, which makes you like Durga. You go out and you sort of take on the world. So the fact is that this is part of your Shakti. Desires are yours to own. You need to stop feeling guilty about it. I think the first thing that I always say to people is that give yourself a little exercise. Open this channel of pleasure. Just think of it in your own head. You don't have
Mhm.
to talk about it outside. You don't have to go and discuss it with anybody and say, oh, this is what I'm thinking. Just allow yourself to think about it. That's it. Most of us, the moment you think about it, most of us kind of go, we stop ourselves because you feel guilty immediately. Like, oh my God, how can I be even thinking like this? It's only in your head. And we have been taught to feel guilty about it because look at our mythologies, look at our stories. You have stories of how somebody looks at another man, and looking at this guy, this young, handsome man who's, by the riverside when she goes to get her ghada of water. She looks at him, and her husband knows that she has committed a pap and the
Mm.
ghada. So she had the power, this particular story, she has the power to carry water because she's so chaste. She can carry water in an unbaked pot. And the moment she looks at this man, that pot breaks. She's no longer chaste.
Oh.
And those are the stories. And the husband then says to his sons, he says, she has become unchaste. She has committed adultery just by looking at this man. You have to be. And so he tells the sons to kill the mother. I mean, these are the stories we've grown up with. These are the stories society tells. We can't help but feel the same way, no? Somewhere you feel that guilt.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. So, how do we change the narratives that exist with the power of storytelling today? How can we do that? Because I mean, I'm sure people have tuned in to listen to your story and to learn the art of storytelling, because we live in a creator's economy, right? So how does one change the stories? How do we change the script through the power of storytelling?
To begin with, literally by telling different stories. It's like that's the narrative, that's the story, right? When we use the word narrative, it is literally the stories that we're out there telling. And like I said, I didn't even know that a lot of this stuff existed when I started my work on the Kama Sutra. I had no idea, Nina. I thought like the entire world thinks it's a book about positions. It is not a
Mm-hmm.
book about positions, as we now discovered. But I also find that, stories are very, very incredible. They're seriously high power. Nothing will change unless the story changes. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
we can make laws and you can go out and have lectures till the story on the ground changes. The story that the common person is telling each other. That's the story that needs to be changed. And sometimes it's literally the tiniest little point in the story. Okay. It's not that the entire story, it's just the angle from which you tell a story. Stories are circular. You can start a story from any point, you can tell it from any point. So you can start a story from a victim's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Your shoulders are hunched, you're saying how this terrible thing happened. You can start the story from a survivor's point of view. Like the person who was made to think this, today my shoulders are back, my head is high, I'm telling this story. I just really, really believe that the stories have to change. Whenever we tell stories of women, we always tell stories of their victimization. There are also a lot of women who have fought and been amazing and, created change and survived and had a wonderful life. We never tell stories of that. So, where are the role models? The role models are the victims. And you
Mm-hmm.
believe that that's your narrative. I want to hear stories of, there was this wonderful set of stories written, which I can't find again. I can't remember the name of it also. The author was a man called Vijay Dandetha,
Mm-hmm.
amazing guy who wrote folk tales from Rajasthan. And he wrote this bunch of stories. I think these are from him, about this woman who's divorced, who lives with her two kids and her mother. And it's not, oh my God, ye ho gaya. There's such fun stories. It's all about how the nanny and the kids get into a lot of trouble constantly because they do all these wild things that they're not supposed to be doing. And the mother's always having to sort this out. And the outings that they have and the joy that they have. That's the kind of role model story I want to hear. I need these stories to get out there and be told. We all live according to the stories that we're told. We need to say, so and so was absolutely awful. The woman said, you know what, screw you. I'm walking out of over here, walking out of here. Plus, I'm taking you to court. I'm telling the entire society so people can point a finger at you. Rather than saying, Ahalya, somebody comes along, Indra comes along, disguises himself. She's the one. I mean, she didn't go out to look for a man. Somebody comes along, has sex with her, but she's the only one that can be punished because, well, Indra is a major god. He can't be punished, so he gets away. She gets made, the story says she gets made into a stone. Okay, which basically means that you get ostracized, you get thrown out of society. You become voiceless. That's the point. I think it's time that we stand up for other women. We don't let them become voiceless. We are their voice. So if a woman is being treated badly and all of the people around her,
Mm-hmm.
instead of are making sure that she's pushed down because, well, she's standing up for herself, then yeah, it's the other people around her that need to come along and say, no, you don't get thrown out of society. We are here for you. You have a voice.
Seema, that's so powerful, right? To be the voice for the voiceless. But what I find, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So if I'm sharing, my challenges on social media. I have friends and family. Now they've shut up because I told them to piss off. But if I'm sharing my personal stories on social media, I'm told, why are you doing it? Why do you want attention? Why are you talking about your life? And
But this is exactly it. Sorry, yeah.
but the fact of the matter is, not only does it make me feel somewhat vindicated, it gives me relief, but I also get so much feedback from people saying, Ninna, thank you so much for sharing your story. This is what my story is, and I felt like this. I'm so happy to know, I'm not alone. That's the biggest thing for me. If
That's
I
the
say
biggest
I've
thing.
been through something, but how do we change that? How do we change that? I mean, is it one person at a time? How do we change that?
Like I said, at any point that you start a revolution, there's going to be a pushback, right? Nobody's going to say, oh, you want to change things? Let's make it all happen. वो तो नहीं होगा. Hence, we fight battles. And we are all out there fighting a battle. It doesn't change overnight, Nana, and it's not an easy thing to do. And you do get a lot of abuse, and you get pushback, and you get told all sorts of things. I still get told, "Tum keh rahi ho, yours have stopped." Every now and then, I still get told. The other day, I put something up on social media. I talked about a mental health issue, and I talked about how I overcame it because I know how many people are out there that suffer the same way. And one of my best friends said, oh, I just can't understand this trend of always wanting to share everything on social media. Oh, this whole. And I was like, because there are people out there who never know that they're not the only ones going through it. We have
Mhm.
we've made that structure so tight. We've created a pedestal which says a woman who's worthy of being respected is the one who's Sati Savitri, who's Devi like, बिल्कुल चुपचाप, जो अपने पति की सेवा करती है, जो अपने बच्चों की माँ, अच्छी तरह से देखभाल करती है, अच्छी माँ है. All of those things, those are the pedestals. You have most women clambering up on that pedestal and saying, this is what I want to be. The moment you step 1 foot out, you say, I've done it all, I've been amazing. This is my little one thing that I'm upset about. You're hysterical, you're stupid, oh my God, you're a typical woman. You know what I mean? Like, we've created so many barriers that when you start stepping over those barriers, there's bound to be pushback. Now, I want you and I want everyone out there to understand that changing a story is not going to happen overnight. It may not even happen fully in one lifetime. It can take a long time because our brain is made up of layers and layers and layers of thoughts and ideas and preconceptions. And when you want to introduce a new idea into it, that entire tower of ideas and preconceptions and thoughts has to shift for you to make space for something new. It's next to impossible, which is why I always say you use what's there already. You take an existing story that exists, you just tell it from a slightly different angle, just slightly different, because if you change it too drastically, it intimidates people, it frightens people. So they don't want to do that. Make it the tiniest change. And what I like in the introduction of the Kama Sutra is that Vatsyayan also says, make it aspirational. So like when he's writing this book, people think that in the 300 and something AD when Kama Sutra was written, that the society in India was very open and wonderful. It wasn't. It was exactly the same. There was the misogynistic strand and there was the people who were fighting for empowerment. So he says that it is really important to make sure that the woman in your life is fully pleasured. And you think, well, why should a guy now take time out? I mean, he's had centuries of saying, I'm the one who's got to be pleasured. तुम्हारी क्या इसमें जरूरत है? हम तुम्हें क्यों सुने? तुम्हारी बात क्यों सुने? So he tells them, he makes it aspirational. He says, if you can do that, your business will do a lot better. If you can make sure your woman is fully pleasured, she will not go out and spend your money needlessly and waste it on other people. She will save your money. She'll look after your household. She'll make sure So he kind of paints this picture of a proposed paradise. Okay. Then he says, if you can be the man who's such an amazing lover, who takes the pleasure of his woman so into consideration that every day, because the body is very limited, right? You can only do so much with the body. And yet every day you can come into the bedroom and do something slightly differently as to bring this wow factor to her, you can then become a better warrior because you'll bring the same skill to the battlefield. When you're out there shooting the bow and arrow in the same old way, you find a way of surprising your opponent. So it's a skill for
Wow.
you. So you see what I mean? You have to, changing a story or keeping it the same is not easy work. My friend Nivedita Menon, who is the professor of feminism at JNU, she wrote a book, and the opening sentence in the book is that it's like wearing nude makeup, okay? Where you wear makeup and to show that you haven't actually worn makeup. So it
Mm-hmm.
looks like there's nothing there. And keeping a story the same, because as time moves on, stories will automatically change because we change. But
Mm-hmm.
for the powers that be, they want to keep the story the same. The machinery that goes into action underneath the story to keep it the same so that the woman is still in control, or
Mm-hmm.
the people of a certain community are still in control, or whatever. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So, changing a story is not easy. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of dedication. You have to be really determined and say, Ye to main karungi. And yeah, provide more role models for anybody out there who's telling stories, who write. I mean, these days, so many people are amazing. They're creating content, they're writing stories. Write stories of empowerment. Don't write stories of the victimization. I know that the victimization exists, but if we're going to come out of that whirlpool, you have to find a break somewhere. You have to find something for people to look up to.
So, Seema, you've been actively telling stories, right? And now the last 2 years on social media, you've put out so much content. I mean, I've seen you grow like, good Lord, you have like more than 500,000 followers today, right? So I'm wondering, you're doing such a super job. You've shifted the needle, definitely. There are a handful of people in this space, right? Talking about sex, sexuality, pleasure, desire, all of that. You've been on for 2 years, right? You've been through your personal challenges, I'm sure professional challenges, life, all of that. Doesn't it get exhausting? Because I sometimes feel I'll get in the groove. Like when I was in Kasoli for 4 months, when we did that thing together, when you did my thingy, the interview, it was lovely. I was in the groove. I kept on churning out content. I came back to Delhi. Suddenly, it just wasn't happening. So, what do you? I mean, I'm nothing compared to you, but you're constantly churning out content. How do you do it? And do you take a break? How do you make it
I
work?
take a lot of breaks. Last year, several times, 3 times in the year, I think I just went off social media for almost 2 months at a time. You get exhausted. Everybody gets exhausted. It's not easy. And it's like a beast with no bottom to the belly. Like it has to be fed constantly, social media. But I have to just keep reminding myself that literally, well, for me, for instance, that's not my first job. I have a lot of work outside of the social media. This is something that is an alongside thing, if you know what I mean. But yeah, you need to take a break. You need to look after yourself, and you need to. Okay, I think. Okay, let's start with this. The first thing about social media is to understand how to put out a story, because unfortunately I'm used to being invited to go to places, to be standing on a stage and to be told कि घंटे का है but please थोड़ा सा extra कर देना ना, you won't come. So I'm used to being told they have to talk for longer. You come onto social media, and if you put something out that's 60 seconds, it's too long. It's got to be 30
Mhm.
seconds. My biggest issue is that if I want to create change, how the hell am I going to do it? If I'm going, that kind of feeds into the narrative of the stereotype, because 60 seconds, 30 seconds, forget. I mean, 60 seconds, you cannot change. I cannot give you an explanation,
Uh-huh.
right? And so, if you want something that will go get across to people so that they come and listen to your longer stuff, you literally have to learn how to tell that story. There's got to be like a one sentence thing which grabs them and hopefully pulls them in towards something else. So that's one thing. The other is how you tell the story. Now, I'm talking about going onto stage or being in public. and
Mm-hmm.
actually speaking. One of the things that people always say, I mean, people have a lot of misconceptions about how they think stories should be told to make people more excited. So some people are like, oh, it's only 10% is content, etc., etc. Yes, it's very much in how you tell it, but it can't just be 10% content.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's an entire science, I can't remember what it's called, which is the study of how you position your hand when you're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So when you want to make a point
Mm-hmm.
and you want to make something really, and you say, but this is seen as a very aggressive gesture. So
Yes, it is.
you shouldn't be doing that. So if you want it
Mm-hmm.
to be an empowering gesture, you say, and this is what we have to do. So this is what the
Wow.
study of this thing says. But how you position your hands, how you position yourself is so important. So for anybody out there who's wondering when they actually say something, my advice always is that there's a few things that you take into consideration which make something sound a little bit more authentic, because the moment you sound rehearsed,
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants to listen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I always say start with a personal story, because you know your personal story better.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to be able to tell it more easily. It's more natural. The other is that a lot of people out there will say, oh no, I never rehearse beforehand. I don't need to practice. I just go out there and I just say it. Okay, bad idea. Most people are too polite to tell you, but you don't sound good when that happens because
Uh-huh.
you're waffling. Always understand what the point is that you're trying to make. And what I have realized over time is that you can't be subtle about your point. You have to say it out. You say, the point I'm trying to make is this. It's important.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really important thing is you plant your feet very firmly on the ground. It changes your posture.
Okay, let me do this now. Hold on one second.
You kind of got to that point where you understand how to talk, so that's not an issue. But a lot of times when people are on stage, etc., if you ever do yoga or tai chi,
Uh-huh.
you'll notice that when you have to do like the tree position, like you have to stand on one leg,
Mm-hmm.
or in Tai Chi, when you move from one thing to the other, it's all about balance, right? So if you are not focusing, if you haven't planted your foot firmly on the ground and you lift the other one up, you're going to topple over. And we all know
Absolutely.
that the day that you focus, you're fine. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same thing. If you are not balanced in your physical stance, your words will not come out properly. If your
Wonderful.
body is unbalanced, your words will not come out the right way. Balance yourself. It's so important. And finally, I find a lot of times when you're either nervous or you're trying to make a point, or you've rehearsed something really well, you go up in pitch.
Mm-hmm.
People start
Mm-hmm.
from here,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay? Lean back, take a deep breath, and go to the bottom of your stomach. Bring out a slightly deeper voice. It's amazing what it does to actually stabilize your story. And
Mm-hmm.
last thing, that's my fifth point, push your shoulders down.
Mm-hmm.
Physically push
Everything
your
is right, Seema.
shoulders down.
No, no, it makes,
Push
I
your
can feel it
shoulders down.
already. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Seema, not enough
amazing.
time.
That's instant relaxation.
I was just saying, I said, not enough time with you. But thank you so much for taking the time, Seema. We need to do this again for a longer duration. But I do appreciate your taking the time. It means the world to me and to everybody who's tuned in. I have a bunch of friends and family who are waiting for this conversation, and I'm sure that all your followers who wanted to learn these tips that you've shared will really appreciate what you've just spoken about. So thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you.